So we are recording Unit 6 in acoustics, and it's called the upward spread of masking. Kind of an interesting topic because it deals a lot with hearing aids. A lot. Because what's the biggest complaint of hearing aids? Background noise. And low frequency background noise is an effective masker. Nothing to do with Halloween, but it covers up sounds. And the main sentence I can say about today's Zoom session is this one sentence: lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. And we'll look at a little bit of the reason why that is. We'll share screen. We'll go into our notes here. And I'll hide this puppy here, pull up the PowerPoint slide. Oh no, the notes. We'll read a little bit of this, and then we'll go into the PowerPoint, and then we'll go back to this again. Masking. Now you guys are going to be taking audiometry very soon in your curriculum at OTC, and you will be doing masking. Now masking is done in audiometry to keep the good ear busy when you're testing a bad ear. So let's pretend this ear is normal, and I'll stop sharing for a second. Let's pretend this ear is normal and this ear is deaf. If I put 10 decibels in here, I won't hear it. 20, I won't hear it. 30, I won't hear it. 40, I won't hear it. 50, I'll hear it. What happened? Sound crossed my skull and got picked up by the good ear. Okay? That's what happens when you're testing hearing, when the hearing is very different between ear to ear. If one ear is much better than the other ear, you have to use masking noise in the good ear to keep it busy. I would tell my clients, you're going to hear a windy noise in your good ear. Don't pay any attention to that. That's just there to keep that ear busy. Raise your hand when you hear the tone in your bad ear, okay? It's all about the tone, okay? And then you proceed with the hearing test. You don't need to use masking if the ears are the same, but you do need to use masking when you've got a big difference between the ears. Then you have to keep the good ear busy with masking noise while you test the bad ear. So that's what the clinical use of masking is. But guess what? That's for audiometry. That's what you're going to be learning in audiometry. That's that. That ain't this. So here we're talking about what we're talking here is what we call ipsilateral masking. Back to you again, contralateral masking, meaning I'm putting noise in the opposite ear that I'm testing. They call that contralateral. C-O-N-T-R-A, contralateral. I'm putting noise in the good ear to keep it busy while I test the bad ear. What we're talking about here is ipsilateral masking. In other words, masking put in the same ear, okay? Or you sitting in front of a speaker and you hear a tone, and what sounds do I need to make in order to mask that tone? So if you read with me here, masking is any sound that covers or hides another one from being heard. In psychoacoustics, that's this class, masking sound is usually put in the same ear as the signal, which is called ipsilateral masking. In audiometry, in 130, what you're going to be taking later on, or maybe you're taking it right now. Are you taking it right now? Are you taking masking now? Okay, you're probably taking it next semester. 130, you're going to be learning masking sound is put into the opposite ear, the non-test ear, to eliminate it from participating. That's called contralateral masking. Okay, so there's two kinds of masking. We're not talking contralateral. That's mañana, later. This, what we're doing now is we're talking about how do sounds cover each other, even if they're put in the same ear, or if you're sitting in front of a speaker, you're listening to a tone, what sounds can I make that will cover up that tone? That's the kind of masking we're talking about. The effect of masking is linear, meaning if the signal got louder, I can make the masking get louder. I can make the signal louder. I can make the masking get louder. I can just tit for tat. I can keep covering. If I make the signal a little bit more, I can make the masking a little bit more. That's all that means. Masking is usually done by bands of noise. I'll stop sharing here for a second. Bands of noise. Look, if I'm testing your good ear, I mean, if you got masking noise in your good ear, I don't want to make that a tone, because otherwise you're going to mix it up with the tone you're trying to hear here. So if I'm testing at 1,000 hertz in your bad ear, I don't want to mask it with this good ear with 1,000 hertz tone. You won't be able to tell the difference between the masker and the maskee, the employer or the employee. You're going to get mixed up between the tones. So you use noise. While I test a tone, the noise here is, it's different, so the listener doesn't get mixed up. So when we're talking about the masking sound, covering up, we're usually talking about a narrow band of noise or a broad band of noise, but either way, it's usually noise. And the signal you're trying to hear is the tone. Okay, stop sharing. Go back over to here. Read on down. Don't worry about masking and beats. I don't like beats, but that doesn't matter. Many other people do, so just leave it alone. Psychophysical tuning curves are asymmetrical. Let's take a picture. Let's describe what we are talking about here. So let's move in your PowerPoint, and we're gonna go right to this slide right here, the most important one of today's talk. So here you go. Let's pretend you live in a van down by the river, and you are hearing a high-pitched sound right here, 1,000 hertz. Beep. And the 1,000 hertz tone isn't all that loud. It's just whatever. Call it X decibels. Beep. Okay. If I want to cover that tone, here you go. Look at, I'm covering it with this masking noise. So you can see with my cursor here, I'm covering that tone with a masking noise. So now you can't hear the tone anymore. I've just covered it. Okay? Now, let's take away that band of noise that surrounds that tone. Let's take it away. Now let me try and mask this tone with a lower frequency. And guess what? If I try to mask 1,000 hertz, for example, with a 500 hertz tone, yep, I can do it, but I've got to make the 500 hertz tone louder. Louder than I did the 1,000. In other words, the best masker for this particular tone is a band of noise that surrounds the tone. So if this is the tone, okay, and I'll just kind of use my little lion here. If this is the tone, the best masker I can use is something in front of the tone that covers the tone. It surrounds the tone. But if I want to cover this tone with a lower pitch tone, I'm going to have to make that lower pitch tone way louder in order to mask this tone. Weird, because I'm not at the same frequency anymore. It should make sense. I'm not at the same pitch anymore. So now let's say you're hearing that 1,000 hertz tone, and I want to mask it with a 250 hertz tone. I'm going to have to make that 250 hertz tone much louder to mask that frequency. And let's say I want to mask this frequency with a 125 hertz tone. I'm going to have to make that 125 hertz tone even louder in order to mask this. You get the general trajectory. The best masker is a sound surrounding the frequency in question. And what I mean by best is I didn't have to make it just a little bit louder than the tone to mask the tone. So if the tone was 50 decibels, maybe this was 55. But if the tone here is 50 decibels, maybe this is 75. And if this tone is 50 decibels, maybe this one's 85. And if this tone is 50 decibels, maybe that one's 95. So as I get further and further and further away from the tone in question, if I want to cover that tone with the masking noise, I've got to make those frequencies much louder and louder in order to cover this frequency. And it should make sense because it's not that frequency. Now, what happens if I go the other way? What if I try to mask this tone with a higher frequency? Instead of trying to mask this tone with lower frequencies, what if I try and mask it with a higher frequency? So this is 1,000 hertz. Let's say this is 2,000 hertz. So if I try to mask a 1,000 hertz tone with a 2,000 hertz band of noise, I'm going to have to just about go to the moon. Okay, so what this means is Lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. Okay? And if you take it home to hearing aids, what's the most important sounds of speech? The high frequency consonants. Sh, s, t, k. What's background noise? Mostly low frequency. Cars, traffic, blah, 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 motorcycles, blah, 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 whatever. Background noise is mostly low frequency. And lows paint a brush over the top of highs, better than highs mask lows. And it has always to do with this stupid anatomy that you've learned time and time again, and I'll share it to you just to bug you because you've had this in 120. It has everything to do with that. It's the shape of the wave. It's all about the shape of the wave. The front of the wave is steep, the tail is long. So if you've got a truck rumbling on the street and Miss Hairy Canary in the kitchen, and the truck is going blub, 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 and it's stimulating low-frequency hair cells. And your canary in the cage is beep, 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 beep. The blub, blub, blub of the truck, the envelope will cover up the high-frequency traveling wave envelope. No problemo. But it doesn't work the other way around. So we learned about it in 120 from an anatomical way, and we're learning about it here in a masking way. So we just looked at it from A, and now we're looking at it from Z. Okay, we're looking at the same phenomenon, just from the other end. So high frequencies, I can shake and rattle that canary cage and get Miss Hairy Canary all hairy and mad, and she can beep, 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 beep till the cows come home, but her traveling wave isn't coming out here. It's not going to cover the rumbling of a truck. And it's just quite simple that way. When you're looking at the 8th cranial nerve, look at the 8th cranial nerve. All the little fibers coming out of the scala media of the cochlea. So here's the hair cell region of the cochlea. And you're looking at the thousands and thousands of these 8th nerve fibers. Let's say I picked one of those fibers. Now you're looking at the 8th nerve. It's tonotopic, isn't it? Highs are wrapped around the outside, and low frequencies from the apex of the cochlea are on the inside. Each inner hair cell gets 10 fibers. So if you've got 3,000 inner hair cells, you've got 30,000 of these stinking fibers. Okay? Each one of them representing different hair cells. So these are what you call tuning curves. They're also asymmetrical. Let's say I picked one tuning curve. I picked one of these fibers. I went with a tweezers, and I went, yep, and I chose one fiber. And I said to myself, self, I want to make that fiber fire a message to the brain. Okay? I'm going to put a little electrode on that fiber and measure what sound do I need to make to get that fiber to fire and send a message to my brain. Every fiber has a favorite frequency. So let's pick this fiber up on the top right, just for fun. Its favorite frequency is going to be this one. How come? Because the least decibels was required to get that fiber to fire. Let's say I want to make this same fiber fire, but with a lower frequency. Let's say I stimulate that fiber, but I give it, something went nuts. I give that fiber a lower frequency. So I may try to make that fiber fire with a lower frequency. I'm going to have to make that lower frequency way more intense to get that same stupid fiber to fire. And as I go lower and lower, I'm going to need more and more and more intensity to get that one fiber to fire. But if I try to get that fiber to fire with a higher frequency stimulation, I'm going to have to go to the moon again. And that shows that tuning curves are also asymmetrical. So you got 3 things are asymmetrical: traveling wave, tuning curves, and your masking situations. So here, upward spread of mask, also asymmetrical. So let's look at our notes now and just read where we were. I'll just stop sharing that and just go to notes and get out of PowerPoint here and read where we came from. All right. Psychophysical tuning curves. Well, that was this. That's called a psychophysical tuning curve. These are masking. It shows the upward spread of masking. These are eighth nerve tuning curves. And then, of course, you have your traveling waves. So all three of those puppies are asymmetrical. Good, they all tell the same story. So now let's just look at, here's neural tuning curves, here's psychophysical tuning curves, showing you they're both shaped like backward check marks. They're asymmetrical. Upward spread of masking. Now we read in our notes. Just like the traveling wave and eighth nerve tuning curves, psychophysical tuning curves are asymmetrical. As you change the frequency of the masker noise, it becomes less and less efficient. It means you must increase its intensity for it to mask. Blah, blah, blah. This is all here. Just put a star here. The best masker is the same frequency as the tone signal. The second best is lower, and the worst is a higher. Let's look at our picture again. The best masker surrounds the signal frequency. If I'm trying to mask a 1000 hertz tone, I'll cloak it with narrow band noise surrounding 1000 hertz. And I say it's the best because I needed the least intensity to mask the tone in question. But if I try and mask that same tone with this band of noise, I've got to make it louder. And if I try to mask that frequency with this band of noise, I've got to make it still louder. And so on and so on. But if I try and mask that tone with a higher frequency noise, I've really got to make that higher frequency noise intense. And it's all about the asymmetrical shape of the traveling wave, which lends to eighth nerve tuning curves, which lends to this. Same story told 3 times. Upward spread of masking. Asymmetry of tuning curves show that lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. Again, caused by the asymmetrical traveling wave. Masking and reduced frequency resolution due to sensory neural hearing loss. Oh, let's look at that now. This is for normal hearing. What happens when you lose hair cells? Now, all I did was draw a couple of check marks. Okay, here's the black one. All I'm doing is connecting the tops of the pillars. All I did, okay? So look at the black check mark. You can see how it's asymmetrical. But now, let's pretend you've got sensory neural hearing loss. Now you're looking at the red. The tone's got to be made louder. You see how that tone is more. Now it's greater because the guy's got hearing loss. He can't hear it till it's louder. But guess what else happened to this guy? Look at how more easily he's masked. The check mark got less deep. It got, instead of being down like that, it's kind of like this. In other words, this tone can be masked by noise here. It can be masked by noise here. Look at this noise isn't hardly any louder than that. It's the same. In other words, this pillar here, the second pillar that I'm drawing, would need to be touching the red line. And this third pillar would need to be touching the red line here. And this fourth pillar could be left alone. In other words, this guy is more easily masked. If he's hearing this 1000 hertz tone, I've got to elevate it because he's got hearing loss. But tones beside that tone, or noise, bands of noise beside that tone, are almost equally effective as maskers. The check mark lost its big deep wedge. It's not just that this frequency is really good at masking that tone, and this one's second best, and this one's third best, and so on, and this one here is the worst. It's like this band of noise here, if it was made here, it would cover it. This band of noise here hardly needs to be any louder, and it would still cover that tone. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. The guy has lost hair cells, And his traveling wave that used to look like this, sharpened by outer hair cells, now looks like this. He's lost that love and feeling. Oh, that, I'll keep my daytime job, okay? He's lost the peak and now it's gone, gone, gone. He's more easily masked. He can't distinguish between frequencies close together. And that story told in the traveling wave carries on to the tuning curves of the eighth nerve. Even his tuning, look at the tuning curve now. Story number 2. Pick one of those fibers. We'll go back to this picture here. Take one of these fibers from the hearing impaired person now. Okay, you've got normal hearing and sensory neural loss. Pick one of those fibers. It's going to have its favorite vibrating frequency or its favorite firing frequency. It's going to be this particular frequency. It needs the least intensity to get it to fire. If I try to get that neuron fiber to fire with a lower frequency, I've got to make it more. If I try to get that same fiber here to fire with this frequency, I've got to make it more. Same story, you've heard this before. If I try to get this fiber to fire with a higher frequency, I've really got to make the higher frequency louder. Okay, same story. Now sensory neural loss. Now let's go to this guy here and pretend he's got hair cell damage. And now pick one of these fibers and play the same game. Whoops. Red. You need more intensity to get that fiber to fire. Yep, because he's got hearing loss. Makes sense. But notice frequencies beside it also can get that fiber to fire. It's more rounded. His tuning curve is more rounded. It doesn't have that point. It's not like exactly that one particular frequency makes that fiber fire. There's a whole slew of them. Or as they'd say down in Louisiana, beaucoup different frequencies could get that fiber to fire. And now you can say the same story when it comes to masking. Psychophysical tuning curves. Same thing, shallower, more easily masked. And this should tell us a big story about why your clients have trouble with hearing aids. It's all about the anatomy of the ear. And it plays out, and it plays out. They have hearing loss, yep. And they can't separate frequencies close together anymore. Their comb doesn't have hundreds of teeth. Their comb only has 10 to 20 teeth. So they're combing their hair like Ted Venema does in the morning, like this. Okay? They can't distinguish frequencies close together, and they are more easily masked. They hate background noise. That's why hearing aids have a twofold task. They need to amplify for the hearing loss, but here's what else they need to do. And jot this down because you'll hear it next semester too. So they need to obviously, like DUH, duh, they have to provide gain or amplification for the hearing loss, duh. But the second thing they've got to do is they've got to increase the signal to noise ratio. In English, this means they've got to make speech louder than the noise. Even though both are in the environment, the hearing aid's got to try and separate them and amplify speech more than the noise. How come? Because the guy wearing hearing aids has damaged traveling waves, and he can't separate frequencies close together anymore. Okay, he's lost the sharpening of the traveling wave. This is no longer happening to that person. Always remember, the outer hair cells are amplifying, and secondly, they are sharpening. He's lost outer hair cells, so his traveling waves look like this. Whether they are confined to the bass, whether they are in the treble, it doesn't matter. The point is gone. Okay? And he hates hearing aids and has a lot of trouble hearing in noise. And that's why counseling and explaining And you've seen this picture perhaps before, an unrolled cochlea, two traveling waves made by two separate tones close together. He's now lost outer hair cells, so now the traveling waves are smaller and they're more rounded because the peaks are gone. You take hearing aids, amplify, you're making bigger traveling waves. Yep, that's better. But you are not restoring the points. The sharpening, his frequency resolution, his ability to distinguish between frequencies close together is permanently gone. And that's why he has trouble wearing his hearing aids, and he's coming to you for an explanation as to how come my hearing aids don't work very good. So this is really quite important to get an idea. You're not going to be telling him this. I mean, good grief. Do you think we're going to be sitting in front of our clients talking about traveling waves? I don't think so. Okay? But you and me as clinicians, let's look at each other here. We are the custodians and the curators of the cochlea. We are the only ones that know this. Ear, nose, and throat doctors do too, but they don't care as much because they do surgery. What do ear, nose, and throat doctors do? Surgery on the outer ear for reconstruction. They do surgery on the middle ear for otitis media, put tubes in ears, maybe stapedectomies for otosclerosis, stuff like that. But they don't do surgery on a cochlea. You can't do surgery on a cochlea. So an ear, nose, and throat doctor may earn, guess what? They earn probably about $800,000 a year. Okay, they're not poor. They do surgery and they're rich. Okay, but they don't deal with the cochlea very much. Oh, sure, they know how to read an audiogram and they know what you're doing in a hearing test. Sure, they know that, but they can't fix. You can't go in and surgically fix. So they don't really care as much that way. Okay, you got sensory neural hearing loss, you got hair cell damage, go to the hearing aid person and get hearing aids. Okay, that's what they're going to say. But you and I always have to counsel people about hearing aids. We're selling them, and then we're explaining them. And we're always explaining the limitations of hearing aids. And you know why? Because we want our clients to have realistic expectations of hearing aids. Because if you made a sale and didn't take the time to explain things, the Lion of Judah is going to come and get you and kill you, okay? Because you made a sale and you didn't take the time to explain things, and now your client is pissed off. And he's going to return the hearing aids. 30-day trial period, folks. So it's us as clinicians. We're not telling the clients all about our anatomy lessons that we learned at OTC. That's not our business to do that at all. We have to put things in plain English. So we're going to say to the guy, high pitches of sound are like the letters S, F, T, H. And you've got a high-pitch hearing loss, so you can't hear those. So speech sounds like it's mumbling. We're going to talk like that to our clients, sure. But we also need to know why. Yep, he's got problems distinguishing speech from background noise. How come? Because his traveling waves are rounded and he can't distinguish between frequencies close together anymore. His traveling wave isn't pointed, I'm flipping you the bird almost. His traveling wave isn't pointed anymore. His traveling waves, wherever they may be, are dull and rounded. So he's going to have a lot of trouble hearing in noise, separating speech from noise. So I, as a clinician, am going to be prepared for that. I know that that's going to be the case. I won't talk to my client about the details why, but I have a 2-year degree. I learned why, okay? And now I've got to put that in English for my client. And I have to explain to my client, these are called hearing aids. They're going to help like a cane does for a bad knee. They're going to really help you. Like a walker does for someone who's elderly and can't walk anymore. They lean on their grocery carts as they walk through Walmart. You ever watch them? I do. You see them all the time. I know exactly why. Because they can't walk good anymore, so they're leaning on the cart. You know, my father-in-law does that all the time. He's got bad arthritis in his knees, and okay, that's what you do when you're 89 years old. No problem. Okay? So I'm going to say to my clients, I can't turn your hearing back to when you were 10 years old. Can't. Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses, you know the song, okay? Couldn't put Humpty together again. But I can turn the clock back 10 years. Okay, I can help. I can make your hearing better, but I can't make it magically like it was when you were 10 years old. And that's really why these guys here are so much more appreciated by the public than these guys here, called hearing aids. Okay? And it's because this is a hearing aid, and these are glasses. And with my eye, my retina is intact. What changes light into electricity? Perfectly normal, just like when I was 10. The only trouble is my eyeball is too long or too short. So I need glasses to refocus the light. God's in his heaven, all's well with the world. What did I pay for these? $1. Where did I get them? Dollarama. Okay? That's the sickening story of difference between seeing and hearing. And we go into these in-depth acoustics talks on upward spread of masking and all this stuff, but it all boils down to help separate optometry from audiology, optician from hearing instrument specialist. And it's really important when you know who you're not, you've got a lot better idea of who you are. So really now we can take this particular session home and just finish our notes quickly, because really, so now that we'll finish this with something called critical bands. Critical bands, weird, sounds weird. Sounds almost like I'm going to start a rock group called the Critical Bands. No, I don't want to zoom. What am I talking about there? Zoom to 200%? No, I don't want to do that. Okay, so now look at critical bands. Once upon a time, there was a guy who lived in a van down by the river, and his name was Fletcher. And Fletcher said to himself this: pretend the guy is hearing 1,000 hertz, a tone of 1,000 hertz. Then what he did was he used white noise. Now, what's white noise? Remember in acoustics a couple of months ago, complex sounds, you could have pink noise, white noise. What's the color white? The color white is all colors together. So you take a color wheel with red, yellow, blue, green, spin it really fast, you're going to see white, just like Nicole's top. It's going to be white, okay? That's what's going to happen. So now let's go and share a screen. Let's look at what Mr. Fletcher did. So Mr. Fletcher took this 1,000 hertz tone and he covered it with white noise. White noise has all the frequencies in it. Sure, he could cover it, yep. But I'll tell you, if you're masking one tone with white noise, that white noise is going to sound really loud. You know why? Because it's got energy here, 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 here. In other words, it's like trying to kill a fly by driving a truck over it. Okay? It's like a little bit of excess, a little bit of overkill. So let's try and kill the fly with, instead of a transport truck, let's try and run over the fly with a car. Okay, let's look at the green. He narrowed the noise. He made it still broadband from green to green. It's surrounding the frequency in question. But it was still overkill. You don't need to kill a fly by driving over it with a truck, let alone a car. So who cares? Let's try a bicycle. You want to run over that fly with a bicycle? That would be the red. He narrowed the noise even further. And it's still, look, he didn't need to make it any louder. It still worked. Even when he took off these frequencies below, these frequencies above, it worked. He didn't need to increase the intensity. It still worked. And then when he made the band of noise even narrower to be like the red, he still didn't need to make it any more intense. As you can follow my cursor, it still worked. It still worked. Okay? He didn't need to. Now look at this. He made it really narrow. So now you're trying to kill the fly with a fly swatter. Ah, well, that'll do it. A fly swatter will kill a fly. Sure it will. It's about this wide. Yep. So he narrowed it to where it's black, And look, he still didn't need to increase the intensity. Okay, he still didn't need to. But then when he made it narrower than the black, now it didn't mask the tone anymore. He had to increase the intensity. Because it's hard to kill a fly with your hand. Sure, Obama caught a fly one time I saw in the White House with his hand. I've done that too. That's hard, you know. You know what I used to do? In school, in 6th grade, there was a girl who sat in front of me. I would catch a fly. It would be on the desk. And I'd catch it and I'd throw it on the desk and knock it out. Wouldn't kill it. It would just be kind of stunned. And I would yank one hair from the back of her head, and I would tie a knot in it, and I would tie it very gently around the head of the fly, not to kill it, and then I would grab the other end of the hair. The fly would wake up. I had my own pet fly. Okay, so this is the person who's teaching you. So now you need to tell Rebecca Krause that you're being taught by an insane lunatic. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. All right, back to Fletcher. I had to tell you that story. And the whole thing is, this is all recorded, so it goes into posterity. It's there forever now. I can't undo it. So here we go. Again, the analogy of running over a fly with a transport truck, that's ridiculous. You don't need that. Can I run over the fly with a car? Still, yeah, but just not necessary. But notice, when he made the band of noise narrower, he didn't need to increase its intensity to cover the tone. And when he made the band of noise even narrower, so it's the red, you're still surrounding the tone in question. He still didn't need to increase its intensity. And when he made the band of noise even narrower to be like the black, just barely surround, he still didn't need to. But when he made it narrower still, then it no longer masked the tone. And that's what's called the critical bandwidth. You could narrow it and narrow it and narrow it only to a critical amount and then no more. Why am I talking about that? Because this is the bands, these are the bands of noise used in your audiometers to cover the good ear when you're testing the bad ear. So you're putting a tone into the bad ear of 1,000 hertz. You are going to use a narrow band of noise around 1,000 hertz in the good ear to keep it busy. And that narrow band of noise will have a critical bandwidth. It can be narrow, but not any narrower than that narrow. And then when you're testing 2,000 hertz in the bad ear, the narrow band of noise automatically switches to surround 2,000 hertz. And it's a narrow band, but it can't be any narrower than its critical bandwidth. It's got to stay a certain width. Then when you're testing 4,000 hertz in the bad ear, the masking noise you're putting in the good ear will automatically surround 4,000 hertz. You don't have to choose this. Your audiometer automatically does this. What do we got here, Nicole? A little kitty or a dog?
No, we got German Shepherd.
Ah, there he is. All righty. Good stuff. All right, we're normal. Okay, share screen. All right, how many more lies can I tell you? So here you're just about all done here. Critical bandwidth, just know that bands can be narrowed and narrowed to a certain amount and then no more. Don't worry about all this blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about that. I couldn't care less. I just need you to know the main details. White noise is broadband noise, BBN. Noise used to mask tones is called NBN, narrow bands of noise, and they are critical bandwidths. That's all you need to know. You're going to run into this as you look further in any readings in this field. Third octave bands, well, that's the critical bandwidth. They're a third of an octave wide. Now, this stuff here, the end of this stuff here, binaural masking level differences, don't worry too much about that. We covered that a couple of weeks ago in psychoacoustics when we talked about having two ears. Okay, and let's just quickly review that because this whole bottom thing here is about cocktail party effect. And you heard about this before, and it's a little bit about masking, but now we're talking about it from a different end. So if I show you the picture here, I think you'll remember what I'm talking about. This is all boring, don't worry about it. Masking level differences. Looking at the same thing we did a couple of weeks ago. Here's a guy, he's not happy. Okay, a tone is in one ear, a tone is in his other ear, noise is in one ear, noise is in the other ear, and they are identical. It's hard for him to pick out the tone. Now let's look here. He's happier because even though the noise is identical to both ears, the tones are different in phase. They're a little bit different. This guy's unhappy because he's deaf in one ear, so he hasn't got anything to compare against. So he's hearing a tone in one ear and noise in one ear. He's not happy. This guy here is happy because he can hear in both ears. He's got the same noise in both ears, but the tone is different. Here it's present and here it's absent. Remember when I talked to you about pilots flying little airplanes and it's noisy in the cockpit of the little airplane and the pilot's trying to listen to the control tower and you got noise like crazy in the cockpit, oh, and he's trying to listen to the tower, the guy telling him, okay, go to this runway. What he's often going to do is take off one headphone and he's going to hear better. You think, what do you mean? You should listen with both ears. He's making something different between the ears. Masking level difference test. When everything is identical, you have a hard time picking the signal from the noise. When something is different, you can see here the tones are a little different, you're happier. This guy's not happy because there's nothing to compare with. He hasn't got the other ear to compare with. This guy's happy because even when the tone is missing, you could think of the pilot, even when I take off one headphone, okay, something's different between the ears, he can easier pick out the signal from the competing noise. Same thing shown here. Unhappy because everything's identical. Tone detection is poor. Pure tone is inverted in phase, something's different. Here, pure tone is removed from one ear. He's happier too, because something's different between the ears. Here's my drawing of the same thing. Signal, signal, something's different. Even though the noise is identical, he's happy. He can pick out the signal easier. This guy's happy too because something's different about the noise. This guy's happier too because something's different between the ears still. Even when it took the signal away, something's different between the ears. This guy's bummed out because everything's identical. This guy's bummed out because he hasn't got anything to compare to. Now I show you this just to talk about why we mention this topic is because of what we did a couple of weeks ago when we were talking pure tones. So let me escape out of here and go to what we talked about a while ago. Why do we have two ears? 3 reasons why we've got 2 ears. Main reason, telling the direction of sound. Remember that from a couple of weeks ago? 2, why do we have 2 ears? Because not just that this ear hears from here and this ear hears from there. Okay? If I'm this way and someone from San Antonio is talking to me, that voice is going to hit this ear a split second before this ear. The tiny time difference will tell me the direction of the low frequency sound. Because low frequency waves are long and they can bend around my head. So Renee's voice is going to hit this ear and before the wave bends around and hits that ear. Whereas high frequency waves are short, too short to bend around my 10 pounds of ugly fat on my shoulder, okay? So now when he's talking, the highs of his voice, I can't use the time cue anymore because the wave is too short to bend around my head. So his voice is going to be slightly louder to this ear than it will to this ear because of my head shadow. So I'm going to use tiny intensity differences between the ears to localize high frequency direction. I'm going to use tiny time differences between the ears to localize the direction of low frequencies, right? You remember that from a couple weeks ago. The second reason we've got 2 ears is because 2 ears are better than 1. And how much better? About 5 dB better. So put it this way. If this ear can't hear until 50, and this ear can't hear until 50, binaurally, my threshold will be 45. If this ear can't hear till 40 and this ear can't hear till 40, binaurally, my threshold will be 35. Two ears are about 5 dB better than one, and they call that binaural summation, right? That's the second reason you've got two ears. The third reason you've got two ears is because of what we just talked about here, called the cocktail effect. And when we were talking about the cocktail effect, we were talking about these faces. Okay? You can pick out the signal better in noise with two ears, because your two ears are comparing all the time. Is there something different about the speech I want to hear, or is there something different about the noise to each ear that I want to hear? And the one-eared person can't do that. Okay, so the three reasons you've got two ears: one is because of for directionality of lows and highs. The second reason is binaural summation, and the third reason is the cocktail effect. And it's mentioned in this masking talk today because it's dealing with the masking level difference. That's all. You know, it's got noise covering a signal, so I just stuck it in here a second time. But essentially, people, that's all we need to know from this. That's mainly it. So when you're looking at today's session, lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. Asymmetrical traveling wave leads to asymmetrical eighth nerve tuning curves, which show that the eighth nerve is tonotopic, by the way. Specific frequencies in the eighth nerve are located in specific places. How so? Lows are on the inside, highs are wrapped around the out. And thirdly, psychophysical tuning curve. Lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. And then we talked about critical bandwidths a little bit. And then we finished with the masking level difference between ears, the cocktail effect. Essentially, that's Itsky Pitsky. Okay? We are done acoustics. We are done psychoacoustics. Next week we do something, as Monty Python used to say, completely different. Okay? Next week we are talking about hearing aids, and I'm going to be showing you pieces and parts of hearing aids, and we're going to be talking about the acoustics of hearing aids. A good way to end this particular course. So next week is called Non-Electronic Modifications of Hearing Aids, and it's quite interesting. It's a neat topic. We'll spend an hour on it, and then that closes and finishes the course. Do any of you have any questions that you might want to ask? Yes.
Yes. Well, I know Sam has the same question. We don't have the notes for the stuff that we just went over.
Ah, now that's weird.
You go to Canvas and it's not on there.
Let me upload it. Thank you for telling me. Let me upload it like immediately. Okay.
Yeah, and then also
that's weird. I didn't know that.
The quiz, I think it's Unit 4, right, Sam? I don't know. It says due date 5/7.
5/7.
A lot of mine say
a lot of them say they're not updated at all.
Yeah, that's going to be Lynn Royer's territory. I would ask her about that, but I'm glad you brought up that these notes here, that's my territory. I got to upload those puppies like now. I didn't know that they were absent. That's
I know
weird.
7's on there because I downloaded 7, but 6 isn't. So.
But 6 is not, and this is
Right.
Unit 6. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Cool. Sam, same thing? Ditto. Okay, all right, got it. All right, adios, live long and prosper. We'll see you next week, okay? I'll stop recording, and a big garbage truck. Hopefully it's come to pick up the trash here. Okay, I knew you needed to know that detail. A very important detail to know. Okay, cheers. We'll see you next